So how many of you have actually used Assistant or any kind of VUI, voice user interface? Do you think it gives you that kind of a perfect experience that you look at? No? Very good. That's where I'll try to help you in case you're the next developer here. You'll be building something which is going to stand out an application with a great application, right? Okay, best practices you say? This is something which is pretty obvious. Why do we need that session? The point is, we are so much used to building monotonous and very streamlined applications that we forget that when we're talking about a VUI, we are talking about building something which looks more like an interaction rather than an application. Now, is there anybody here who has enjoyed talking to a customer care, the automated customer care? You have enjoyed? Seriously, can we have a swag for him? Like a huge round of applause for him, actually. So, see, the point is, nobody likes that, right? And that's the problem. If you have an application which is like, again, sounding like some other automated recorded thing, it won't look nice. And that's where we have to keep in mind that, okay, when we're building something for VUI, it has to look like an interaction. So now the problem is, this is what we start thinking as, right? That this is something which we want to build. And what we see at the end of it? Right? Reason being that we didn't take care of best practices. And that's where this becomes very important. Now, what is the first thing which you normally do if you have built an application, when somebody comes to your application? What is the first thing, very first thing? Anybody? Sorry? So, yeah, so you basically have some kind of a greeting. You basically are making the user familiarize with your application, right? And that's where we're going to talk about what the best practices are for greetings. So point is, when we are talking with Assistant, for example, and your action on Google is basically deployed on top of Assistant. So when, suppose a user says, OK, Google, talk to Number Genie, for example, Number Genie should introduce itself. It should say, welcome to Number Genie. I know this might look very obvious to it, but point is, I have seen a lot of developers making this mistake, not actually introducing themselves. Then what you should do, you should tell what exactly can the user expect from your application. Now, the first thing is achieved. You've already got the user onto your application, plus you have already introduced yourself. But then you should tell what are you exactly. Now think of it. How many of you know what Number Genie is before even reading this? Number Genie looks very, very like vague, right? Nobody knows what exactly it means. Then it says, welcome to Number Genie. I'm thinking of a number between 0 to 100. What's your guess? So now the user knows, OK, basically I have to tell a number, right? And of course, please don't be too generic. Guide the user. Don't say, what can I help you with? Until and unless you are the director of Inception movie who can build Assistant on top of Assistant, right? Because you'll be building some action which is very specific to your use case. So you should not be very generic about it. So what happened today, or maybe yesterday actually, I went to a restaurant, local restaurant next to my hotel, and I asked him, Anna, what can I get? He said, masala dosa, butter dosa, this dosa, that dosa, whatever dosa, I don't know. So the point is, when you're talking like that, he kept on speaking for 2 minutes without even like letting me say, OK, I just want a plain dosa. Basically, when we come to the application again, do you expect for yourself to actually go through the entire process again? So suppose if our application is introducing itself, saying, I am Number Genie, I am guessing a number between 0 to 100, what's your guess? And every time if it says that, do you really like that? No, right? So the point is, you should always taper. You should always introduce it yourself as long for the first time, but then short for the old user. So when a user is new, you can do something like this. But when he's coming back, welcome him with, welcome back to Number Genie. What's your guess? Because he already knows now that you're basically going to be guessing a number between 0 to 100. You should always limit the information. Even for the first-time users, you should not be like going on and on and on and on. You should not be telling about, okay, I'm number genie, I'm thinking of a number, I'm a great, I have this, then blah, blah, blah. You should always be precise as possible. Of course, long the first time, but still precise. And then never give more than 3 options. So this is similar to what I was just telling you about, right? If you have so many options being told to you straight away, then it doesn't help. So make sure it's not more than 3. You can always mix up between the 2 that you're going to surface, but then give the third one as more options. Okay? And take turns. So this is what I was coming to. Like, just don't keep speaking. Okay? Let the other person also speak. Just don't keep dancing around it. That the user knows that I have to give an input. Please do that. Okay, so coming to the microphone management. The problem with this voice-based devices is you should always let the user know when you're expecting to keep the mic open. You should not just directly keep the mic open and then instead don't keep the mic open when you're asked a question, right? So don't leave the mic open without a very clear message when the input is needed, because the user should know when he needs to respond. And the questions can be explicit or implicit, but the point is user should always know. Don't keep the mic open. I bet right now also there are so many apps, if you go, sometimes they just keep the mic open. So there has to be timeouts, and also user should know what exactly should be done. Now let's go through some scenarios. We'll see what are those kind of common scenarios which normally apps go wrong with, and then how we can, or what we can do about it, right? So look at this conversation. Can you guys read it? Perfect, I can speak for you. Perfect. So point is, suppose there's a Number Genie app which the user is talking to. So Number Genie says, welcome to the Number Genie. Guess a number between 0 to 100. What's your guess? The user doesn't say anything. Then I didn't hear number. The user still doesn't say anything. If you're still there, what's your guess? The user still doesn't say anything, and we have an awkward silence here. Right? But then the one thing that you can see here, that despite having these kind of silences, there were some reprompts. So there can be the case that the user didn't get you first time. Okay, so what should we do? How should we handle it? So you could see a conversation, example conversation right now. Now what we should do? Never repeat the same question. Don't again and again say, I'm guessing a number 0 to 100. What's your guess? You should never try more than 3 times. Because if you gonna ask for more than 3 times, it's gonna be a never-ending conversation. And then you should always rephrase with detail the first time. And then keep it short the second time. And third time, just exit. Of course, politely. You don't have to be rude there. Okay, I'm going by, you're not talking to me. Okay, so let's see a scenario, what we mean by the rephrase with details for the first time. So suppose I say, call Saurabh. The app says, which Saurabh? And I'm clueless, okay? I always knew one Saurabh. But then the app says, the first time with rephrasing and with details, you have 2 Saurabhs in your contacts, Saurabh Rajpal and Dhawan. Now this time, the user can say Rajpal, right? Because he has more context now. So you see, it's not always the user's mistake at times. Sometimes the user doesn't really know what exactly to input. So this is something which you should take care of. And always, when you're doing it for the first time, always rephrase with details. Now let's look at something like you have to keep it short the second time. So the app says, welcome to Number Genie, guess a number. User doesn't say anything. You say, I'm expecting a number between 0 to 100. Now you already rephrased with detail here. You haven't asked the same question. The user still doesn't say anything. He's not interested, I think. But then he just asks, what's your guess? It doesn't keep on going around and around it and didn't repeat the same thing. It just asked very precisely, what's your guess? Because essentially it means the same. Now, silence is not the only thing which normally you have to deal with. You have to deal with unexpected responses as well, right? Now, think of it that way. Suppose you go to a counter, and when you're talking to that person, instead of answering your query, he's just randomly saying anything, right? But still, you will try to talk to him and convince to answer you. So that's what you should do here as well. Now, think of it here. It says again, let's talk to Number Genie. What's your guess? The user says, I hate you. See, the point is, he might be talking to somebody else. But the mic was open, so this is what was recorded. So it's not his intention that he said that, but then the point is, you got this as an input. And you are now clueless, okay, what should I respond back with? I'm only used to numbers. So you should not just exit there. You should have a fallback where you talk about, I still didn't hear a number, do you want to say? And he just talks something else. So point is, sometimes users don't understand how to respond with. And that's where you should still have some follow mechanisms, but then remember, not more than 3 times. Another thing, like talking about the MP3 files. So sometimes many developers think that introducing your application can have a voice recorded message. And then when somebody comes to your application, you're like, okay, welcome to Number Genie, this is the history of this, blah, 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 and you keep on going for 3 minutes. You'll have this kind of a user who's just sleeping by now. He's lost the interest in your app anyway. So never do that. Never keep any recorded messages for more than 2 minutes. Okay, as I was saying, it's not always the user's mistake. You should always give user the credit. That's how you should build. This is not a best practices for you. This is for you to build. So feel that difference. When we are talking with 2 people, we don't say, okay, if you want to listen to my next sentence, say next. Right? Even on the interface or the graphical interface, you always say, you just write next there, and you expect the person to know, right? You don't say click here for going next. You don't do that, right? So similarly, in a conversation as well, you should always just expect the user to say the right thing because they know how to talk. Right? And again, people hardly ever say nonsense. They do, but when they're talking with your application, they probably won't be talking nonsense. And at least that's something which they won't be intending to do, right? They know what they want. That's why they came to your application. This should be your assumption. You can't assume, okay, by mistake, he must have launched my application. Let him go to whatever. So they know what they want, even if they didn't say so. So build like that. And also, they want to help. Now, suppose, if I'm talking with somebody who doesn't understand my accent, for example, don't I reiterate myself, or don't we reiterate ourselves with something which is more understandable? So users are investing time to being understood. So they will reiterate, maybe in a different way. So these are the 3 things that you should always take care of. Understand. The first input, the second input, those kind of things can differ because the user is trying to help. Coming to the robust grammars. So basically, okay, tell me anything else than yes. If you have to say yes, tell me any other version of yes. I agree. Yeah, exactly. So the point is, this cannot be very mechanical, right? You just cannot expect the user to say yes or no. Like I told you, it has to be an interaction. It doesn't have to be a mechanical-looking thing. So of course, you cannot say, if you want to proceed, say yes or no, that you're doing that, because that's a bad practice. Now, what you should do? Somebody can say, I agree. Somebody can say, let's proceed. Somebody can say, yeah. It's a very common mistake. Navigation. On a VUI, you always know that if, as a user, you want to go back or go front, I have the options. But what if I want to go to the previous step? There was something which I didn't understand, or I input as something wrong, and I want to go back. You should always have these kind of intents too. Repeat. So normally in a conversation, now again, like during the Q&A session also, for example, if you ask me a question and I don't understand, what would I say? Can you repeat yourself? Or will I just move on? I'll say, will you repeat yourself? So similarly, when a user is interacting with your assistant app, it's expecting that you handle these cases as well, where if you just say repeat, you should just repeat what was intended to be said. And then, if suppose your application is like really exhaustive and somebody needs to leave to, say, pick up his wife, for example, and then you keep on asking questions and talking, that doesn't make sense. There should be a way that you should be able to halt the app. You should handle these words so that you just end the conversation right then and there. Right? Okay. The other aspect of communication. When we are, say, dealing in a, like when we go to a bank, or when we are talking with some other people, what's the best thing that comes to your mind? That the other person is actually understanding what I'm trying to say, right? That's a basic of any kind of communication. The point is, that's where the confirmations come into the picture. When you're talking to assistant device, the user is not really sure that if the thing was actually interpreted the right way or not, right? And that's where people don't trust the speech technology anyway. So what you should do is, as an application developer, you should reassure the user that they were understood correctly. And you should repeat what it said, right? Now, there are two kinds of confirmation that you can actually do, like even in normal this thing. You can be implicit about it by just repeating or by explicitly confirming about. Now, when you come to the implicit confirmation, say, it says, I'd like to reserve a table at Desi Dhaba. So next question can be, a reservation at Desi Dhaba? Sure. For when? It didn't ask, Desi Dhaba, are you sure? Right? It didn't ask that. But it asked, Desi Dhaba, but for when? So you can say 6:30, it says 6:30, how many people? You say 4, it says 4, you're all set, the confirmation is done. So see, it had to drive that conversation, so it didn't ask specifically about repeating those things, because it will look very tedious and the users will not have a good experience. But then something rather implicit. Coming to the explicit ones. So there are cases when you need to be very explicit. Now in case of, for example, the transactions. For example, when you're talking about some money. Now I say, I want to send $500 to Power Star Pawan Kalyan, right? So app asks, so you want to send $500 to Power Star Pawan Kalyan. Is that right? Because it involves money. So you have to take that decision and also keep confirming the user, okay, what exactly, I understood what you exactly said. Now this was the confirmations. Coming to the invocations, which I think Chavi already covered, that there are two kinds of invocations that we have. One is explicit, one is implicit. Now, for example, you say, talk to Uber. That's when you're saying that, okay, I explicitly want to launch Uber because my intent is to book a ride through Uber. Now, there are times when you can just say, I want to book a ride, and you really don't know what are the kinds of applications which support that. So that's where it can say or suggest you to launch Uber. So this becomes very important for discoverability. So you have to make sure that when you're writing your actions, you have appropriate actions to handle not only the explicit invocations, but also the implicit ones. And for the explicit ones, so if you go to the assistant.google.com/explore, the explore directory, assistant directory, you can browse through all the applications which are there for assistant. The first thing that you can do there is click on that, go inside and read about it, what exactly the app does. And it also talks about ask your assistant section. That means that how you can invoke this. So that's where the explicit invocations can be mentioned about. So you should always try everything like talk to, speak to, ask, so that your application gets invoked, and rather just not be left around. Because, of course, if you have done the hard work, you want it to be used. And you don't want to miss out on it just because it couldn't be launched. Right? How many of you agree? Okay, only one person agrees. That's good enough for me. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so one last time. So make sure everything works. Now you have already built a great app, but then, of course, you want it to be going to the production. You don't want it to be like rejected. So what you should ideally do? You should always make sure that what the name reads in the directory, that is something which the people is also using to launch it. You should always have explicit invocation which is matching your red name. Now, why I say so is there are some applications which basically developers launch in multiple languages. Now, when they're launching in multiple languages, the name itself can be changed, right? And when the name is changed, but you're still expecting it to be launched the original way around, it's not going to help. So it will get rejected. So you should make sure that your invocation name is matching the finitical name that you have displayed. You say that I am going to support my application on all sorts of assistant devices, be it voice only, be it the display only, or be it a combination of both. But then you have not taken care that it actually gets supported on all devices. So don't make that mistake. It's a very common mistake. People say, I'm going to support on all, but then they don't do those kind of justifications. And then that's where the application actually gets rejected, and you're wondering why. So one thing which you talked about security aspect as well, who was that guy? You were, right? So you asked about, okay, so if I'm a malicious this thing and I launch some like content which is like not very safe, the point is, before even getting launched, it goes through a rigorous like manual testing, as Chavi mentioned, and there has to be the proper privacy links and those kind of stuff. So make sure that your privacy policy is up to date, it has a valid link, and you have proper icons as well. Of course, the low-quality agent. You should not have a low-quality agent which is not able to cater to the user's need, or maybe it's not doing what you actually wanted to do. And don't provide the low-quality icons. This goes without saying. Like, people who are actually exploring the directory should be able to see what exactly your action is and what it means. So I'm going to stop here about best practices, but probably since we have time, let's move on to the analytics integration. Now, you may say, why is this important? So how many of you have actually developed any sort of application? Most of you have, right? And you must be having some kind of integration with Google Analytics or any kind of Google, like analytics platform. Is that right? Is that right? Of course. Why is that needed? The need is to understand what kind of data is flowing through your app. Similarly, it goes here as well, or what kind of platforms it's being accessed from. Right? So suppose you build an action, and then you are expecting that you are only having like most of the users coming from your phone. But at the end of the day, you realize that most of the users come actually through your non-phone devices, which can be your assistant, physical assistant device. You do need to know, because your future features will depend on that and what all things you need to take care of. So for that, we have some great integration options anyway. We have the Dashbot.io and Chatbase as well, right? Now, coming to the Chatbase, so this is something which is like homegrown within Google. It's something which is already integrated into the Dialogflow and shows this kind of interface. It tells about what were the kind of inputs those were handled, what are the kind of inputs which are not handled. Now, from these, you can actually see that, okay, though you are, say, a menu-driven application, you still didn't respond to anything which mentioned about coffee, for example. Right? So you know that you need to have an intent, or maybe train the model in a perfect way that it handles those things as well. And coming to the features which Dialogflow, which Chatbase has with Dialogflow already, is the session metrics and the top intents report. So when you have so many intents, you know already that, okay, these are the top intents which are getting invoked. Then you can work more around that. The other things can be integrated easily using the API, the Chatbase API. And few things are always in work in progress, like filters like platform version. This is something which is going to come soon automatically, so you don't need to sweat around it. This is the code lab, which you all can go through. It's a 4-step code lab, takes just 15-20 minutes to understand how you can generate a key, how you can actually start using and calling the API from the Dialogflow. Coming to the dashboard, it's another analytics platform which gets easily integrated with your bot, and it's again a 4-step thing. You just need to create a bot API key, which you can then add a dependency to your Dialogflow, because of course when you're building and you're using some external thing, you have to add it to a dependency. Then into the code, just mention about the API key that you got, so that you have the exact instance of your dashboard, and then just pass the Dialogflow object. So when you're basically working with the action, you are talking to a Dialogflow app. Everything that you say or the response comes, it goes to the Dialogflow app. Pass that object itself to the dashboard. And what it will do is, from that app, it will consume each and everything which is getting the interaction. Basically, then that's done, or maybe well done. Okay? Last thing, so maybe we can just all say, OK, Google, on the count of 3. We'll do that. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.